All right. So today I'm here with Suzanne Paulinski. Super excited. She is the founder of a company called Rockstar Advocate, and she's a mindset coach for musicians. So basically, she helps artists to be 3 times more productive without feeling like overwhelmed and getting really like burnt out, which is a challenge. Like it's really hard nowadays to not do that. So I love that like you play this role for artists. You've worked with clients that have toured with artists like Halsey, Ariana Grande, Alicia Keys, and yeah, I'm really excited to have her on today. So, Suze, thanks for taking the time to be here.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. I'm a big fan of everything that you do for artists and as an artist yourself. And I'm just really excited to be here. So thank you.
Awesome. So I'd love to start off by just hearing a little bit about like your story of getting started and kind of how you discovered some of the concepts and like the techniques that you teach people in terms of mindset and productivity.
Yeah, sure. So some of it is just stuff that's always come naturally to me, and others were very difficult lessons to learn over time that I finally accepted. But basically, I started off in the music business when I was 18. I was the first graduating class of Drexel's music industry program. So a few classmates and I started Mad Dragon Records. It's a student-run label that still runs today. So I'm really proud of that. And I started working at Atlantic Records while I was in college, just being their college rep, being their summer intern, doing all the things they needed me to do. I had like 3 different jobs for them and Warner Brothers while I was in school. And then I got out of school early and I followed my boss from there to AstroWorks, and I was their Midwest sales coordinator, and I had my own office and I was 20 and I felt so important. But I also hated the job. I wasn't, sales is not really my passion. I was in charge of these wonderful accounts like Sam Goody and Virgin Megastore and Tower Records and places that didn't exist soon after I was there. So the writing was on the wall and the industry was really changing. And it was just, I kind of fell out of love with the whole major label thing, which ever since I was 12, that was the goal. Like I wanted to be at a major label. And I just realized it just wasn't for me and not something that I was passionate about. So I left and I started a business with my college roommate, and we had our own hip hop record label and we signed a band and we were on top of the world. We felt amazing, but things with that band didn't work out. So then we decided to switch over into more artist development stuff. We changed to a consulting firm and we were writing EPKs and bios and all of that stuff. And we just did it because we were good at it, but we both hated doing it. And so we weren't scaling it. It wasn't growing. And so we parted ways amicably, and I decided to just go back to school. I went and got my master's in psychology. I thought maybe I'd leave the music industry behind and do social work. And then I realized, no, like this whole psychology thing, like I love it. And I tend to be always kind of the one that people went to for advice and figuring out problems. And I realized we don't talk about that stuff. We don't talk about mental health. We don't talk about relationships and all the emotions and mental anguish we go through in this business. And I realized like that's what I could offer and really enjoy doing. So it was just a matter of kind of figuring out how to monetize that and how to package my services. And so I just did a lot of market research in person, like asking a lot of the clients I had worked with as a bio and EPK author and asking them how I could best help them and what they would value. And I learned that, marketing therapy isn't really what gets them. It's not really something that they want to talk about right off the cuff. So, I market time management and goal setting, things that are very, very important, but there's a deeper thing there. And we usually end up doing a deep dive into really the fears and what's holding you back and the mental roadblocks that you go through that keep you from keeping it on schedule and keep you from reaching that goal that you've always wanted and stuff like that. So it's a mixture of therapy and organization.
That's so awesome. I love that specific like outlook too. Just kind of like realizing that for most people, the external stuff isn't the real reason why they're not like, happy, it's because of the stuff that they have like going on inside. What are some of like the biggest like examples of some of those fears or like some of the biggest challenges or mistakes that you see artists make when they first come to you?
Sure. So, I mean, as you said earlier, I mean, I've been lucky enough to work with a lot of amazing artists who the public may not know of, but they play for the Ariana Grandes and the Justin Biebers and the Alicia Keyses, and they're on stage with them. And what I've noticed when I work with all of them, I mean, you think, oh my God, not only are you've got this exciting life and you're on tour and you get to play these stadiums, and then you also don't have to deal with the fame and all the other stuff that, an Ariana Grande would have to deal with. So it's like, that's kind of cool, but it's really taxing on them because, they do get to go perform and they do make a good living from it, but it's not, they still have rent to pay when they go home. They still have relationships that they're trying to manage. They still have to then go from being on these stadium stages and getting all this, hearing all those crowds, to then going back to their apartment a couple months later and hearing silence. And, it's very jarring. And so there is something such as post-tour depression, which is real. And I'm sure, as you know, as a musician who's gone on tour, it can be a big shock when you come back and you're not living out of a suitcase and your environment's not changing every 24 to 48 hours. And, your diet needs to, get back on track and all of this stuff. So, helping them really find routines. I think as creatives, we like this freedom. And, as an entrepreneur myself, I get to make my own schedule. But I've learned after, 5 years of working from home full time that, you do need a routine. You might not have to have a set schedule every day, but you do need a routine to ground you. And that's why I have that slash through Rockstar, because I really see Rockstar as a dual role. It's your rock, right? You're grounded, and then you're able to be that star. You're able to succeed and go to great heights because you're centered and grounded. And so that's kind of what Rockstar means to me. And I think that's the biggest thing that I see with artists and creatives in general is that, we're all over the place and we want freedom and we want all this stuff. But when we're too untethered, then it becomes chaos and depression and anxiety creep in and all of this stuff. So it's a lot about just finding what centers you and what keeps you on the right path so you can do all the other things you love.
That's fantastic. Yeah. I mean, it is kind of like a sobering thought, I think, for a lot of people to realize that even when they achieve the thing that they want so much, like to be on tour and to be on stage and to like, be like quote unquote successful, that it's kind of like when you get there, you're like, oh, now what? Like problems, like they don't, like it doesn't go away. Like, there's you get to the top of the mountain and it's like, oh, actually, nope, this is just the bottom. There's another mountain. And it just kind of like emphasizes the need for what you talk about, what you help people with, which is like, figuring out what's going on inside and how can you enjoy the process and like the journey along the way. One of the things that you mentioned that I'd like to dive into is, especially for like creatives, like you're saying, like there can be kind of this resistance to like routines and the idea of like being too structured or scheduled. But at the same time, it's so important just for us, like psychologically and just like with our bodies, like to get into these like rhythms. So what are some of the biggest habits or routines that you think are really important and that kind of help musicians without squeezing the creativity from them?
Right. No, absolutely. Yeah. I think, as you said, when artists hear routines, they're just like, oh my goodness, but it doesn't have to be this big, long structured thing like a 9-to-5 job might be, or when you were in high school and it was like every 40 minutes, there was something else. It doesn't have to be that structured, but it is important to have just certain things, even if they're 10 to 15 minute routines in the morning or at night. So I think it's important, for one, I always say meditation, and I was definitely somebody who resisted meditation. I can never quiet my brain. I gave up on it a bunch of times, but I've also learned that meditation doesn't necessarily have to be the same for everybody. I mean, it's really just finding ways to listen to what your body's telling you. Take a minute to understand the environment around you. So if you're not one of those people who want to sit with your legs crossed and do the ums and, sit there super quiet, you don't have to. But it can be anything for just sitting in silence for 5 minutes, or, sometimes for the people who can't quiet their brains, I say, okay, well then don't, but then at least use that time to do a visualization exercise. So, and that's its own form of meditation. So, one of the things that we often is a big fear for us, we think we fear failure, but we don't. We usually fear success, because failure, we've all had failure at some point. We know what that feels like. No matter what it is, it's going to feel pretty much the same. But success, you're always working towards something new. It's always something different. And we don't know what that different feels like. We don't know, well, then what comes next? As you said, like, I might reach that goal, but then what happens next? And that's scary. It's vague. And as animals, survival sets in, and we run from things that aren't clear to us. So I always like to, if I can't quiet my brain, do a visualization exercise where I'm imagining what life looks like when I've achieved that goal. It's not a fake it till you make it, but it's like a see it till you make it type of thing. And seeing what my life looks like. How do I feel? Not so much how am I going to get there, because you might not always know that, but how am I going to feel? What will accomplishing this goal do for me? And really getting familiar with that as specifically as you can, because then it's not unfamiliar. And then you do want to go towards it, and you do want to fight for it. So definitely some sort of meditation exercise. I definitely recommend some sort of physical exercise, whether it's stretching or yoga or cardio or boxing, like whatever your thing is, to do something physical during the day. And then just having in your routine, journaling or, drinking water, other healthy habits that allow you to purge and recharge and rehydrate to get to where you want to be. So like I said, those things can take, you can do all of those things in 1 hour that I mentioned, and then start your day or take a break during the day to do those things. So those are the things that I think are most important.
Yeah, those are all awesome. One thing I kind of want to dive into like meditation a little bit, because
Sure.
I'm the same way, where it's like kind of resisted it at first. And like most people, I think when I first sat down to start meditating and like all the thoughts were coming up, I'm like, I'm doing it wrong. Like,
Right.
I'm screwing up, and like tried to like get myself to not think.
Right.
And it wasn't until like I kind of like probably someone more spiritually enlightened than me like told me, like, hey, by the way, you don't have to not think. Like, don't try to not think. Like, that's just another thought about not thinking.
Yeah.
Like it's okay. Like, that's actually means that if you're someone who is going to meditate for the first time and you sit down, then almost without fail, like it's going to feel like there's a lot of stuff going on. There's a lot of thoughts, and it's going to be like really hard to like, you can't quite like turn those off.
Right.
And that means that meditation is like probably the most important for someone like that, where it's like just becoming aware of it and just like focusing on your breath. I've heard this analogy before of like a dog, like a puppy, when they're going to the bathroom, like basically they veer off the path, then you're supposed to pick them up and like bring them back and put them down there. And then they kind of like, the puppy like goes off again, and then you grab them and you like put them back there. So I think like meditation is a lot of the same way, where it's like noticing the thoughts are happening, like, okay, that's okay. Bringing it back and just noticing the breath and getting to that grounded, feeling is just like awesome. It doesn't usually happen. For me, it was like probably like a month or so into meditating every single day.
Right. It takes time. And I always say, like with anything, acknowledgement over judgment. So, understanding, okay, yeah, my train of thought went off, but instead of, oh my God, I can't believe my train of thought went off, it's like, okay, ooh, I noticed it. Like, how many days do you go off and you don't notice it? So making sure that the good thing is you noticed it and you go back, and then it will happen again, but it'll be for less time, and you'll notice it faster, and then you go back. And it's a skill, and you have to stick with it long enough to see progress. And I think, like counting breaths is something that if I'm like all over the place, if I could just sit for 30 seconds and just count my breath, it will, even if you can't silence your thoughts, they'll quiet them a little bit, they'll slow them down. And that's really all you want to do, because when the thoughts are so jumbled and everything, your stress goes higher, your anxiety increases, and it's just, just breathing. I mean, and sometimes, obviously we breathe because our body just does it automatically. But my friend Marnie Wander said, the best thing, she always said, like, when's the last time you took a really deep breath? Like 5 seconds in, holding it for 3, and then, 7 seconds out. Like, when did you and just doing that once a day is like a huge, huge thing. So yeah, anything that can make you hit pause for a second is effective.
Yeah. Yeah. Awesome. And for someone who's like completely new, who's never meditated before, but maybe they've heard like a lot about it and they're kind of interested in getting started. How do you recommend that they kind of start the practice? Like, is there a time of day that would be best for it? How long should they meditate for?
Right. I always say, I mean, it's literally if you feel like I don't have time, and we all have the time, but if it makes you feel better, then do it in the shower, if that helps you. Or, I like to do it, I like to do it before bed, but some people like to do it first thing in the morning. I think whatever works for you. I really like using Headspace to get started because it's very guided in the beginning, because I always assumed I'm doing it wrong. But when that little man comes in and says, okay, I know your thoughts have gone, your thoughts are back, like he will guide you and continually talk you through it, in the beginning. So I always like something like Headspace if you feel like you're always going to be doing it wrong. It was nice to have somebody kind of guiding you through it. And you can do it for a minute, 3 minutes, 5 minutes, 10 minutes, whatever works for you. So I really like Headspace as an app to kind of get the ball rolling.
Yeah, Headspace is great. And they really like gamify it, or they just like, it feels like very like, it's fun. Right. Like you want to keep making progress.
Exactly. They have cute little video tutorials and to help you visualize what's going on. It's really great.
One thing I want to recommend too is this like little micro hack. And you would say it was like a micro commitment. Like whenever there's something like meditation or working out or like something that you're kind of like resisting or like, I kind of feel like I should do this, but I don't really want to do it. It seems like a big thing. One thing that's really helped me, I heard this from someone, it was like a book somewhere. They're like, cut it down to like a ridiculously small amount. That's just like you have no excuse, where it's like the amount of time isn't a thing. Like even if it's like 1 minute, what usually happens is you sit down for the minute of meditation and then it's like, you have the momentum and the momentum kind of carries you forward.
Right.
So a lot of times, like I'll sit down if I know I need to reply to like 30 emails, then instead of being like my goal for the day being like reply to 30 emails, I'll be like, okay, just reply to one.
Right.
And then like reply to the first one. And then like the momentum kind of keeps you moving forward. So I think that also could be helpful for people just getting started, just being like, just like a minute, like you were saying.
Yeah. I mean, I always say with anything, whether it's meditation or like you said, answering emails or anything that's, again, we don't respond to vagueness. So when you have on your to-do list, like emails or like, I need to do this or, whatever, you post a YouTube video, I always say microtask and monotask. So, one thing at a time, and breaking it down till it's so small that like, you're just like, well, this is stupid at this point. I can do that piece. It'll take me 30 seconds. And it's like sooner or later, you're just like, okay, well now I'm going, let me just do the next piece and then the next piece. Or if you are, like I always say, microtasking also always helps with if you're stuck at the doctor's office and you're like, well, I can't film my YouTube video. No, you can't, but you can write, a treatment for it, like an outline. You could decide on the title. You can write the captions for social media. Like you could decide on what tags you're going to use. Like, so, if you microtask it down on your list, then you realize, oh, I can be productive while I'm sitting on the subway or while I'm stuck at a doctor's office or while I'm waiting online somewhere. Like there are things that you can do rather than just looking at this big, gargantuan task and being like, well, can't do that right now. I don't have 4 hours. It's like, okay, but there are things hidden in there that you can break out. So just as a productivity hack in general, that definitely helps for sure.
Yeah, that's really awesome. And in terms of big things like that, so that was a tip. In terms of like big, overwhelming, stressful things where it's kind of like we might want to procrastinate or avoid them. Sure. One way to kind of overcome that is to break it down into like really actionable, small chunks. Do you have any other advice for people who would like have sort of this like fear of even looking in that direction, where it's like they know like there's kind of this big thing and they're scared of putting them, like what are there any other techniques or things that you would recommend for them to do to kind of like face it head on?
Yeah. Actually in my planner, we have this exercise called doubt dump and flip the script. So what I like to do is really just like mind dump onto a sheet of paper, like everything that's in your head of like, I have to do this, I have to do that, I have to do this. And like, most likely you don't have to do all those things right now, but just get them out on paper and then write down your doubts. Like what are your doubts about just that one thing that you're trying to accomplish. Dump out all the doubts you have, like, I'm not going to do this well, or somebody else is going to do it better, or it's already late and I should have done this last week and I'm too late to do it, or, all these things. People are going to troll me on social media and make fun of me. All those things that you might be doubting yourself about, dump it all out on paper, or look in the mirror and talk out loud to yourself, get it out, and then flip the script. One of my business coaches, Jordana Jaffe, gave me this exercise, and it was, really powerful, where it's like, why do you always assume, if we don't know the future and it's 50-50, right? But we always assume it'll go bad rather than assuming it will go good, because, oh my goodness, what if it's not? Then I look like a fool. But if you can flip the script on those doubts and say, because it's probably not going to be fantastic and it's not going to be awful, it'll be somewhere in between most times. So if it's, doing a video or a Facebook Live for the first time, and you'll say, I'm going to have tech issues. People are going to make fun of me. I'm going to say the wrong thing. I'm going to get stuck. It's like, okay, tech issues. Yeah, maybe, or maybe you'll get it right on the first try and you'll realize it's not that difficult, or you'll learn from it and you'll do it even better next time. People are making fun of you. Yeah. Or people will comment about how great your personality is and how much what you were saying has helped them, or how entertaining your song was, or how, they didn't have anything to watch or do tonight and you gave them some entertainment, like really flipping the script on why would you always just go negative. You might as well go positive. You don't know the outcome anyway, so you might as well enjoy the journey thinking positively rather than just saying, oh my goodness, I'm going to fail at this. This is going to be awful. When, okay, maybe you won't knock it out of the park the first time. Maybe you will, but it's probably not going to be as bad as you think it's going to be. So you might as well veer more positively and do that. So I really like getting things out on paper so you can see it and you realize, like, yeah, that wasn't realistic. Like, nobody's going to die from me having like a messy Facebook Live. No, it's not life or death. I'll still have a career. I'm more than this, 2-minute Facebook Live. And just realizing when you get your doubts out onto paper, you start to realize like how irrational they are, and that, this is not something worth holding you back from something that you need to do.
That's really great. So first of all, I want to get that planner, because that sounds awesome. It reminded me of a story. So basically it sounds like the process is to dump all of the doubts and all of the different things that are coming up, because a lot of times the fear, like inside of us, like can kind of like amount, it can blow itself up, it can escalate, it can seem really big. Right. When it's like, when you actually get it physically down, you're like, oh, like that's actually not as bad. If worst case scenario, like that would be okay. Right. It reminds me of one of the artists that I'm working with right now. We just launched their music video and they got like a ton of awesome feedback, like a lot of love. And then there's like this one person who comments on it. It's just like really almost like violent, where it's like weird. You're like, wait, what? And they're like, this is effing blank. Like, this is terrible. And he showed that to me, and he showed it to the rest of our little group. And he's like, this made me laugh out loud. Like, this is the kind of thing that I was actually really afraid of. Like this, like something like this, I'd get this kind of reaction. And when I read it, like it made me laugh, and it was a big win for him, because it kind of made him realize, like, wow, even those things that he was scared were going to happen, like when they actually happen, a lot of times your reaction to it can be significantly different than you would imagine. It might be like a relief. Right.
And one of the things I learned most importantly, there's this book called The 4 Agreements by Don Miguel Ruiz. And one of the things was, don't ever take things personally. And when I was a manager at Crate and Barrel, I was their merch manager at their flagship store. And so we had a lot of foot traffic. A lot of them were celebrities and a lot of like rich to-do people out on Park Avenue in New York. And so we'd get like a lot of difficult customers sometimes. And it was, I had a customer throw things at me once, like physically throw merchandise at me and hit me. And I just thought to myself, this is ridiculous. And this says nothing about me or how I am as a customer service rep, or, how I am as a worker. She just had something real bad happen to her, or she's just not mentally, capable right now. But this says everything about her and nothing about me. And I think it was such an important lesson. Like I always say to people, you might be at a day job that you don't like, but there's always things to be learned that you can put towards your career. So if you've got a day job right now, like find things to learn from it and take from it that you can put towards your career. And I always told myself I was learning so much about branding and customer service being at Crate and Barrel, because it really taught me, like, I could have, luckily I have some wonderful clients, but every now and then you're going to have a difficult person, and or somebody's going to say something online that's going to, try to be really hurtful. And as they say in the 4 agreements, it has nothing to do with you. You don't know if that person just lost their the love of their life and now they're angry and you're the punching bag, or you don't know if they just got fired and now they're jealous of what you're doing, or like whatever it might be, but something spurred that on that had nothing to do with you. And I think that's a really important thing to learn to master as you go through this industry that's really not that kind a lot of the times, to learn that, like, it's not on you. It has nothing to do with you. And I'm so glad that your client was able to laugh at it, because it's like, wow, that person took time out of their day to like be that hateful and ridiculous. Like, that's sad.
Yeah, I feel like you're totally on point. Like, that's the ability to not take things personally is like a superpower. In terms of like cultivating that ability, probably one great tool is like meditation, because it kind of helps you see, like, okay, you're not your thoughts, you're not your body, you're not even like this idea that you think that you are. Do you have any other like strategies or like ideas for helping people kind of realize that? Because that's a difficult thing to realize for all of us. Like, I think all of us have like our egos, and sometimes we get wrapped up in things, we take things personally. So like,
right.
how do we make that shift?
Yeah, that's a really great point. And one of the things is, I've learned is, if you think back to like your college years, your high school years, where we're surrounded by so many friends, right? We keep all these people around, even people that, we shouldn't be friends with, but we're like, oh, whatever. And, and then as you get older, your circle starts to shrink. And sometimes that can be sad, and you wish you had more time for friends and all that stuff. But it then comes to a point where you're like, okay, I have to really be mindful of who I'm keeping in my circles, because the outside world, the social media world, the being on stage world is so unpredictable. And there's so many people you come in contact with that you need to keep your circle small and intentional, and healthy. So, like they say, you are the average of the 5 people you surround yourself with the most. So make sure that the people you're friends with, I'm a loyal person. I'm all about being friends with the people who came up with you. But if they're not thinking in a healthy mindset, maybe you don't talk to them as often, or maybe you limit the time that you have with them, and you find people who challenge you, who support you, who cheer you on, who do want to see you do well. So when those things come up, you can call one of them and say, this person just said this to me, and I'm like, I know it's not about me, but it feels like very personal attack, and and then let them lift you up. Allow people to help you, allow people to support you and cheer you on. I think too many of us, when it happens, we tend to isolate and we get embarrassed, and then we kind of go into our own little hole and we let it fester and fester. And I think it's really important in those moments to call someone, like, as soon as you can, or go out and meet them for a meal, or go to the movies, or take your child for a walk in the park, or put on your favorite rom-com or something. Like, do something positive and don't do it alone. Do something with somebody that you love. So you need that, build yourself back up, because you will fall off sometimes. And no matter how many times you tell yourself not to take it personally, it takes time to master that. And even after you master it, you'll still, have those moments of taking it the wrong way. So yeah, definitely surrounding yourself with people who will have your back. And then also what I like to do as a little exercise is I like to take a minute, like, let the sting happen. You can't always help how you feel. That's how it felt. That's real. It's valid. But taking a moment, and I always think back, like, to that person who threw the stuff at me. When I was working at Crate and Barrel, my father was actually at Sloan Kettering getting cancer treatments, and it was a very difficult time for me. And so I would sometimes have an attitude or lash out or not want to be there. And I then used that, and I realized, wow, those people didn't deserve my attitude either. It had nothing to do with them. So I know what that feels like. That person who just said something really nasty, let me think about, it's kind of like the opposite of the doubt dump. Now you take something that they said and you go worst case scenario of what's probably going on in their life. I think, oh my goodness, I hope they didn't lose anybody that, close to them. I hope they weren't just through a traumatic event, maybe they just lost their job, or they had somebody break up with them, or like, I just think of like imagining what could be making them so angry, because then it makes it less about me. Then it's not about what they just said. And it's giving me empathy towards who that person is, rather than walking around with anger. I want to hurt them back. I want to make them pay. I want to get them thrown off of Facebook, like whatever it is. Like immediately try to have more empathy and be like, try to go there. If it's difficult for you to say it's not about me, well, then try focusing on them for a minute and meditate on that and say, wow, they must have been having a really bad day. And I try to do that too.
That's really powerful. So focusing on them and wondering, having compassion and wondering like, what is it for them? Like, I hope that they're okay. Like, I wonder like, what is it that's causing them to be like violent?
Right.
One really good example, I think this is kind of like a spiritual opportunity or practice for us. Because I notice this a lot, is that with like traffic, especially, that's like one place that like, I don't know what it is, but this like unconscious pain comes up for like, there's a lot of road rage, and it's a really easy way to get to assume the worst about, oh, that person's an asshole, because they just cut like, or they're, but like you're saying, like using that as an opportunity, I think, to like, because if we assume that, first of all, we don't know, like we really don't know, like they could be on the way to the hospital because they have a pregnant wife who's,
right.
like,
right.
We don't know what's going on, but we aren't going to know unless we like get out of the car and like run up to them and like, and so like either we can get really mad about it, or like you're saying, like we can kind of flip it and be like, give them the benefit of the doubt and be like, wow, like, they must really have somewhere that they need to get to, or like there must be something really going on for them that's like, there's a good reason. And I think giving people the benefit of the doubt is just, it's not going to backfire in the way that like assuming the worst is going to, because no one ever, like if you assume the worst in someone and then they find out that you're assuming the worst in them and like they weren't like the worst, then it's like, it hurts, and it doesn't make them want to like, there's a quote like, treat someone like they could be and they'll become that person, but treat them like they are and they'll get worse. Something along those lines. Or it's, so I love that. I love that exercise. One thing you talked about that was really, really smart is the friend group, like the five people that you spend the most time with, like that makes a huge influence on you. Because I think you're right. Like I think that probably makes a bigger difference on us than most of us realize, because we feel pretty independent and we don't fully realize the effect that like the environment can have on us. In terms of making those changes, what are some ways like how do you consciously kind of let go of some of those toxic relationships? Because it's probably really hard for a lot of people who has been friends for a while, and it's kind of like it's wrapped up with their identity. Like they just, how do they get to that point where they're able to kind of like let go and do it in a way without like, to minimize the amount of hurt that we do for like other people?
Yeah, absolutely. It's definitely difficult. And I mean, I've had, the same core group of friends since elementary school. And so it's, it's definitely hard when a few of them might go down a different path or go through a difficult time. And, I'm one of the most empathetic people in my circle. And so sometimes I go down a rabbit hole trying to help them or fix them or understand where they're coming from. And it's important to be a good friend and to have compassion and do all that stuff. But, I always used to say to myself and my group of friends that like, especially in your 20s or any time in your life that you're really trying to lay the groundwork for something that matters to you, it's going to be a selfish time in your life. And, everybody goes through that. I mean, as you get older and you don't see your friends because they're nesting and building a family, or they're going for that big promotion and they've got to be at work a lot longer than usual, or, whatever that might be. When you're building a career in music and it does take a lot of time, I think it's important to see your friends, but then, that time gets limited. And especially if you have a family and other things that you've got to balance as well. So, I think one of the things is, you can kind of just let time do its thing and just limit the time you have. And so when somebody that has a positive role in your life wants to meet up for coffee, you're like, yes. But when maybe somebody who's more negative and, is going to bring you down, say, oh, I'm sorry, I just don't have the time right now. And if it gets to a point where you feel like, oh, they're going to feel like I'm blowing them off, because you kind of are, and you might be hurting their feelings. Like, I've had discussions with some of them and saying, listen, I love you. You matter a lot to me. And I do want to make time for what we have, but we got to call a spade, and you enjoy being in negativity. And I get that. And if you don't want to change, that's all on you. But what I'm building right now is super important to me, and I got to be in the right headspace. And unfortunately, I just can't be there with you if that's not something that you want to change. And I've had those conversations. They're tough to have, but I think just being truthful and just saying, like, here's why. And if you do want to see me more, I'd love to, but we gotta change your mindset too. But some people just really are happy being curmudgeons. Like, that's their default. That's what they like. They like to complain, and that's okay. But then I need to see you like once a quarter and not like once a week. And just laying it out there. I mean, it's like dealing with somebody with an addiction. It's like, I love you, but your lifestyle isn't healthy, and I'm not going to enable it. So here are my terms. And that's what it is. And if the friendship is really there, they'll get it, and they'll either change and you'll inspire them, or they'll say, okay, and it is what it is. And luckily my friendships have still weathered those storms, and it is a little awkward, but people respect when you just call them out on their shit. Like, it's like, it is what it is. So I kind of just like to attack it full on and just say, here's what we're dealing with. Like, here's why I'm pulling back. And I'd love to not pull back, but then these things have to change.
Mm. Yeah, that's great. There is something like really powerful in facing like the hard truth and just like standing, like, like dealing with it rather than like avoiding it. Because the easy thing is to, what you mentioned earlier, to isolate and like, and to like take those in. It was a podcast. Tim Ferriss was interviewing Amanda Palmer. I was just listening to it like a week ago.
Great
and
one.
Awesome. And she said this quote from her mentor that was something like, when we don't face our demons, they go to the deepest layer of our souls and they lift weights.
Yeah.
I was like, oh yeah, that's a really good one. Like that one,
Yeah.
like kind of gives you goosebumps.
Definitely. And it's also like, my therapist used to say, it's that angst and stuff. It's like a little kid pulling at your shirt going like, ma. And if you keep ignoring it and hoping it'll go away, finally it'll be a tantrum in the middle of a department store going like, Mom. And it's like, you want that to happen. I mean, it's being good to that inner child and saying, here's what I need. You would never let your child go without what it needs, so that's what you need. And so you have to take care of that, or else, yes, the demons will go lift weights, the child will throw a tantrum, all of those things will happen. And that's the consequence.
Another question I had for you was, we gave them like you gave them some really awesome habits like meditation, water. What I would want to get clear on is like, maybe what's a good process for people to start like adding these habits? Like, should they do it one by one, or is it like all at once, or like, what's the best way for them to start like putting these different habits into practice?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I definitely think it's best to go one habit at a time. And they say usually it takes about 28 days or so for a habit to stick. But certain things like drinking more water, you can maybe pair that with stuff and behaviors. Like, if we break down a habit, there's a great book called The Power of Habits by Charles Duhigg. And he writes for the New York Times, and it's a really great book. But he says basically it breaks down into a cue, a routine, and a reward. So, the cue or the trigger, it's like, what is, starting that behavior, whether it's a good habit or a bad habit. And you're never going to get rid of a habit, but you can replace it. So, for instance, he says like, he started to put on weight and waste a lot of money every day getting a cookie during work. So then he'd say, okay, well, I tried to then just not get up from my desk, but that really wasn't helping. And it just made him, then he just started bringing snacks to eat at his desk. So he realized the cue to get him to buy the cookie was that he'd get up around 2:00, go to the water station or the little cafeteria area to talk to people, and then buy the cookie and then hang out with his coworkers for a little bit and then go back to work. And he was able to identify, well, what's the reward? I don't like buying the cookie. It's not healthy for me to eat a cookie every day, but like, what am I getting out of that? And it wasn't the cookie. It wasn't being able to eat it. It was the fact that when he got the cookie, he was able to then talk to his coworkers. And that's what he was getting out of it. So then he realized, okay, the cue is 2:00. He starts to feel a little tired. The routine now is what he's going to change. Instead of buying the cookie, he gets, just a free glass of water. And then he sits and talks with his coworkers, and then he goes back to his desk. So that was the reward. He keeps that the same, and he keeps the cue the same, and then he just changes the routine. So, that's what I try to do. It's like, okay, I know, well, I'm going to wake up and the cue or the trigger is that I have to start my day. But rather than going straight for my cell phone, let's put that glass of water there and maybe the yoga mat right there when I get down, and the cell phone is on the other side of the room. So I do those things first, and then the reward is I get to go to my phone and see what I missed while I was sleeping, or whatever that might be. So just kind of changing the routine and setting yourself up. If something is like drinking water or working out or something like that, if you can put those physical things in your path and have those things first, maybe you start with water. And if you do those 3 times in a week, then you start to add something else and see if you can do them both together. If you can make it into its own little sequence, that would help. And I love apps like Loop Habit are really great for reminding you, did you do this? Did you drink that water? Did you get that done? And so it sends you little reminders. Of course, it's on your phone, but you can do the same thing with like Alexa or with a notepad. I have little notepads that have, just checklists, and you can make your own. You can print them out on a spreadsheet and just have them wherever you wake up, have them on your wall, have it right there. So you can be like, oh, that's right. I got to drink my water, got to take my vitamins, got to sit and meditate for 2 minutes, whatever that is. I think if you do it in groups that make sense, in a sequence that makes sense for you, working within your own rhythm, I think you'll be more successful at making it happen.
That's so smart. Yeah. Like setting things up so that they basically happen as automatically as possible.
Right.
So it's
exactly.
like you wake up and boom, like your gym clothes are right there. Like you can't walk to the door without putting on the gym clothes.
Right.
That's really great. And so so setting things up automatically. It reminds me of Eben Pagan is like one of my earlier mentors, and he has this idea of inevitability thinking, whereas basically like make the thing that you want to happen automatically, or make it so it's inevitable. So it's kind of like you're throwing your hat over the fence, where it's like it's got to happen because it'd be more painful for it to not happen than for you to like do it. And one example that he gives for that is in terms of like creating a new habit. Actually like getting an accountability partner and sending them like a check for like $1,000 and being like, if I don't email you and say that I like completed my habits, or if, like at this certain time, then I want you to cash this check immediately. And so for the person, it's like, well, I don't really feel like, getting up at this time or going to the gym. Right. It's like, well, I don't feel like losing $1,000 more than I don't feel like going to the gym. So, that seems like kind of a good example of what you're talking about with like making things automatic, setting up your environment. So it's just like, it's as smooth and easy as possible.
Right. And you can do, if some of your habits want to be better at saving money for something, things like Capital is a great app, and you can do stuff like every time it rains, take $5 from my, checking and put it in my savings, or, every time if I don't drink water, and I think it's Capital that you can mark it off. And then if you don't mark off that you've drank water, it will move money, out of your checking and into somewhere else. So, like setting it up in whatever way, as you were saying, like sending a check to your friend, one that you can trust, that stuff helps. It's, it's, positive reinforcement. Yeah.
Yeah. What was the name of that app?
Capital. It's QA. There's no U after. It's QAPITAL.
That's really interesting. So it's basically that idea of like you set it up so it takes money out if you don't do the habit.
Right. It's kind of like an if this then that app for your money, as like Zapier, or if this then that apps kind of do things automatically. Capital can do that with your money.
Wow, that's really interesting.
Yeah.
All right. Well, yeah, I mean, I feel like we got some really, really awesome stuff here today.
Yeah.
So are there any sort of, so I'll ask you a question here about people being able to like get like either a lead magnet or like what's the best way to follow up with you. But before that, is there anything else that we haven't talked yet that you felt like you really wanted to cover that would be like helpful as a closing remark?
Sure. Yeah, all I would say to everyone is to just be kinder to yourselves and realize that you don't, we're so trained specifically in this industry to struggle to succeed, and if we're not a struggling artist, we don't want it. Sorry. If we're not a struggling artist,
both of our, so my alarm went off here. 12 o'clock.
If we're not a struggling artist, then we don't want it badly enough, and that's really not what it's about. And you're in your own lane. So if you could just be kinder to yourself and understand, my mission here is to redefine the hustle, is redefining what it means to really work at your goals. You're the only one that you're in competition with. And you don't have to be in pain to get to where you want to be. So that's the only thing that I would really just want everyone to leave with as a reminder. And and just thank you again for having me on this platform. I love all you do for artists, and the summit is incredibly valuable. So I hope that they're eating up all of the things that you're giving them. And if they want to learn more, I've got a free gift, and it's a workbook. It's downloadable or fillable PDF. You could print it out or type on it on your devices, and it will walk you through having this mindset and figuring out how to get it done, how to get your goals done in a way that's achievable, and something that, as we were talking about, ways to break things down and stuff like that. So it's a little like a mindset goal setting workbook, and it's available for free download if they'd like it.
Awesome. Well, Suze, thank you again so much for being on the interview. This is great.
Thank
I
you.
love everything that you stand for. like I feel like it's so
Right back at you.
it's so important, and like it's so needed and not often like talked about in this industry. So you're awesome. Appreciate you taking the time. And
Thank you
for
so
everyone
much.
who's watching this, we're gonna put a button underneath, so it's just like really easy for you to click on and go get the planner. So right below this video is the button there.
Great. Thanks so much.